I'm going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully we have a few other folks hopping on. Um, this uh, this webinar is all about the Housing Policy and Production Survey that the Met Council's housing team administers. And so we will go over parts of the survey, how to fill it out, and leave time for questions too. This this webinar is being recorded. We'll have that recording posted online. We'll have the presentation posted online, and I can send it out over email as well. And yeah, we will do our best to answer questions, but if there is something that we can't get you an answer to directly on the call, or you have a specific question related to a specific community, we can follow up afterwards as well. But yeah, throughout, please feel free to just drop questions in the chat, and we'll probably stop throughout if there are questions related to specific sections. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so first I want to go over the general purpose of the survey. The Housing Policy and Production Survey is an annual survey sent to all cities and townships. We are gathering a number of things with this survey. First, this is how we gather information on specific requirements for Livable Communities Act grant program participants to remain in good standing with the program, as well as information on local housing projects, policies and programs, and just general efforts and tools that communities are using to create affordable housing opportunities in their communities across the region. So specific to LCA grant programs, the survey is used to track affordable and life cycle housing opportunity amount, LHOA spending. And this, we're going to talk more about this later in the presentation, but this is an amount that communities need to spend, and there can be a variety of ways that communities can meet this requirement. But if this spending is not reported in the survey, we don't have a record of that as being met. And not meeting that requirement can affect a community's ability to draw down LCA funds. Similarly, for housing action plan questions, this is another requirement of LCA in order to draw down funds. Those questions need to be answered through the survey, and those are generally around asking for responses on what communities have done and what efforts they're taking to meet their identified housing goals. Just in terms of more general tracking and reporting out on this information, the information that we gather in this survey is used to report out on how cities are meeting their housing goals and needs over the decade. We also share housing production data entered into the survey with Housing Link for their streams database. And just generally, this tells us, what tools are feasible on a local level in different types of communities across the region, and where are there opportunities for additional Met Council support in using or implementing different types of tools across the region. So we do plan to report out on housing policy and production data through online reporting interactives soon. So we are excited to do a better job of reporting this just in terms of making sure that this is more accessible to communities than just publishing the annual report that we have been in recent years. And then just to highlight one other benefit of filling out the survey, and specifically through adding information on new affordable construction projects. We use the Housing Policy and Production Survey to credit construction of affordable of those newly constructed affordable units towards communities land guided for affordable housing. And Land Guided for Affordable Housing just briefly aims to have communities guide land at high enough densities to potentially support affordable housing throughout the region. And so the council provides each community with an allocation of affordable housing need number. This is a forecast using a regional economic model that allocates a share of affordable housing units needed to communities expecting sewer serviced household growth over the next decade. So guiding land at high enough densities to meet that needs is required through ALGA, but ultimately what we want to see through that is the creation of new affordable units. So filling out this section of the survey is a good opportunity to receive credit for that. And we do that by sort of counting units added through the survey to act as a buffer. So if there is a future CPA that might reduce the number of units possible in the community, that's just another way that we are trying to credit communities that are constructing new affordable housing units. All right, so now I'm going to walk through different parts of the survey and go through what information we're looking for and how to complete it. This will start with the city or township staff member who is completing the survey, creating an account. If you haven't previously filled out the survey, you can do that by going to the website listed here. We have staff on the back end of our survey that will approve the request to register, and then you will receive a confirmation email once you have been authorized as a user. And then when you log in, you will have access to your community's surveys. The bottom screenshot on this slide is sort of showing that example of having access to past surveys as well. That's a question that we get a lot. So although the survey does, have slight changes year to year, so that will be clear, but you will still have access to view past surveys. And then when you do open the survey, you will see the set due date at the top, along with tabs for each section of the survey. Each section will have directions or additional information that might be helpful to filling out that section. And there will be a place to submit comments within each of the survey sections as well. And we can talk a little bit more about when those are used, but ultimately, if you have any questions on the survey, once you get into it as well, you can always email me, and that's another way that folks ask questions with the survey as well. So that's totally fine. And then when you submit the survey, it will then be reviewed by Met Council staff. And if there are questions about anything that was submitted, staff will reach out. An example of this might be like clarifying the affordability term of a new construction project, just to make sure that we are accurately crediting units for ALGA. That happens a lot. Yeah, then once the survey is reviewed, you will receive an email saying that the survey has been approved if all requirements are met. Alternatively, if, for example, an LCA participating community didn't complete the survey, staff will be reaching out to say that there are statutory requirements that need to be fulfilled in the survey, and they have not been met, and yeah, so you will receive notification of that as well. I will say that we are really trying to keep our survey contacts up to date. So if you know that there has been a staff change or will be an upcoming staff change and want to get another person added to the survey, or sometimes, for larger cities, especially, we do sometimes have multiple staff accessing the survey, adding information, that's totally fine. So we're always open to that. I just want to acknowledge that this has obviously been a challenge, but we are doing our best to keep our contacts up to date. And then here's just a screenshot of when you get into the survey, what it'll look like. This is not the actual survey for this year. We have a test site as well. So that's not the official due date. The survey has not been open yet, but just to give you an idea of what the survey looks like. And then the tabs along the top are going to be the different sections of the survey. And I'm going to keep going, but again, please feel free to add questions in the chat, and then we will have designated time for questions at the end as well. All right, so now I'm going to jump into the different sections of the survey that are indicated by those survey tabs that we just saw on the previous slide. So first, I want to start out with the survey sections on new construction and rehab and preservation of units. So to go over what we're looking for both of these sections, we are asking staff to add housing project information for projects that contain units that are affordable to those with incomes at 80% AMI or less for rental units, or 115% AMI or less for ownership units. So if you have a fully market rate project, that does not need to be entered into the survey. We are really looking for affordable units at those AMI levels. On the next slide, I'm going to show examples of what those different categories of requested project details that we look for will look like in the survey. But this will include general project information, the affordability of the units, an affordability term for the units if one exists, even projects that do not have an affordability term can be entered into the new construction section of the survey. And then there is a section asking about local funding sources that the city or township contributed to the project if those existed. And then I want to mention that, so projects that are entered in the survey carry over year to year. So there is a place to, again, indicate the status of construction of a project or the status of project funding. So you, when you enter projects that might be in a pre-development stage, this will enter over into the next year, and then that project can be reviewed and updated again. So again, there are details on what we're asking for in both of these sections, but for new construction and preservation, this will ask staff to review projects currently entered in the survey that might have been carried over from previous years. Is the information still correct? And does the status of the project need to be updated? So for example, has a unit that was, or has a project that was previously in a pre-development stage, does the affordability breakdown of units need to be updated? Those are the types of things that we would ask staff to review. And again, does a project need to be removed? That is not something that we allow survey respondents to do, but you are able to leave a comment in the survey saying, hey, there's a duplication of these projects. This one can be removed. And then Met Council staff will go ahead and remove a project. Each year prior to opening the survey, we ask counties for information that is used to pre-populate multiple sections of this survey. Affordable housing project information is included in that. So if you see projects listed in your survey that have partial details provided, these are likely affordable housing projects that we received information on from counties. So that's an opportunity to confirm whether or not local dollars went into those projects as well. And then when you edit a project and save updates, that project will be marked as user reviewed. So in this small screenshot on the bottom of the slide here, you can see under user reviewed, it says yes, and then there's a green checkbox. So that is visible to respondents and Met Council staff. That lets us know that that project has been reviewed and updated. So we can trust that the project details are accurate. And then the difference between the new construction and the rehab preservation tabs that I want to emphasize here is that new construction will only include new construction units. That does not include units that are maybe new to the affordable housing stock. So unless they are new construction, those units should be added to the rehab and preservation section. And we will review rehab and preservation categories in an upcoming slide. But that, I think there's been some confusion around that. So that is something that we really want to make sure that we are highlighting here. All right, and so this is showing just some screenshots of the information specifically for new construction projects and units. These are the types of things that we're asking for. Again, general project details, that's where you can indicate the status of the project, where it is in terms of being funded, as well as affordability of units and an affordability term. General financing information, really the main section of this for local communities is going to be that local financial contributions box. And if funding wasn't contributed in that category, you can go ahead and put 0. But in some of the lower boxes, it's gonna, if counties submitted information, for example, that they contributed to a project as well, we will enter that in the back end, and then you will be able to see that in this financing section as well. And then the project tools are mainly highlighting, we want to know what development tools cities are using to help make these affordable projects possible. So that is what that section is for. All right, so going back to the categories for rehab and preservation projects, we've updated some definitions because we want to be really clear about what we're looking for here. So these are the categories of preservation projects that will be on the rehab and preservation tab of the survey. Again, we've just seen a need to clarify where acquisition projects should go. And we've received a lot of questions about land trust units and what about 4D. So for the purposes of the survey, and this is listed in the survey as well, but substantial rehab is going to include significant improvements, repairs or renovations, or system replacements to a building or a unit that cost at least $5,000 or more per dwelling unit. This can include improvements to common areas of a building or be repairs or replacements to two or more major building components. Again, that is listed in the survey, but then projects categorized as preservation are those that meet that definition of substantial rehab and require that the property guarantee rent and income restrictions through an affordability program or term. This can include acquisition of a property if the property also meets that substantial rehab definition requirement and requires restriction of rent or incomes over an affordability term. So those are going to be categorized as preservation projects. And then we did want to clarify additional methods of extending or creating unit affordability that does not include rehab. So that's going to be the definitions listed for the next two categories. Just additional options of extending affordability without rehab. So thinking about maybe the preservation of a federal subsidy, extension using 4D designation or another mechanism, and then the affordability creation or acquisition is going to be a separate category as well. Any questions or feedback on this since we're on this slide? All right, well, I will, Jonathan, I see that you're typing. All right, well, feel free to, we can always come back to this. These definitions are new and just an attempt on our end to add clarity. So yeah, we can definitely come back to this as well. All right, so now I'm going to move to the affordable and life cycle housing opportunity amount section of the survey. So this LHOA is an annual required expense of local dollars for LCA participants to be eligible to draw down LCA funding. So communities must spend or contribute at least 85% of their annual LHOA obligation. This amount is determined every year based off of a community's tax base and population. So it changes year to year. I think it would be, well, I don't know. I think it would be I think it would be fair to say that, is relatively in the same, you're not going to see a huge increase, but I just want to say that amount changes yearly. And then what qualifies for spending? Any spending locally that creates affordable housing opportunities for specifically renters with incomes at 60% AMI or less, or homeowners with incomes at 80% AMI or less. These activities can include affordable housing development, down payment assistance for low-income homeowners, excuse me. So first-time, first-gen programs, staff time spent producing plans that support affordable housing projects, the write-downs of public land for the creation of new affordable housing, permit fee waivers or tax abatement for affordable housing development, annual lost tax increment due to the creation of new housing with TIF, staff time spent on public meetings related to new affordable housing development, other staff time or consultant fees, developing policies that specifically create affordable housing opportunities. So for example, something like an inclusionary housing policy would be a good example. And then any other like local HRA or EDA revenues used to create affordable housing. That does not include economic development activities or general staff overhead costs or other studies or programs that don't directly create affordable units or opportunities for low income households. And the source of funding spent locally that can count towards LHOA can include local tax revenue or unrestricted sources of income, and local taxes levied on behalf of county HRAs and CDAs can also be eligible sources of funding. So this is, again, something that we connect with counties on prior to opening the survey. We ask counties to submit funds by community to pre-populate this section of the survey that indicates local spending that was used on county LHOA eligible activities. And this is where, just generally speaking, this is where we really want to make sure that we are connecting with communities trying to meet this requirement, and are, maybe if you're coming up short, or if a county didn't submit information based off of the levy, we really want to sit down and make sure that we can, talk through examples, because a lot of times folks have met this, and it's just a matter of like talking through what spending counts. So Jonathan, I see a question. I'm going to finish this slide and then we'll come back to that. The screenshot on this page is going to be an example of what this section will look like in the survey. So the LHOA obligation for this community is, oh, it's so small on my screen, be almost 63,000. That number is listing the LHOA obligation, and then there has been no other spending submitted here. So this is the describe LHOA spending, and dollar value is where that would be, a community could add that spending to count towards this as well. And then just another example of a community where that might have pre-populated spending from a county. It'll look something like this. So this is showing that almost $180,000 has been spent locally through levied dollars, and that meets 132% of the LHOA obligation for this community. So if you get to the tab and that's what it shows, there is no need to add additional spending. This requirement has been met. And yeah. All right, Jonathan, I see your question. Are the lower AMI thresholds for counting under LHOA than the general survey Met Council policy decision, or required per state statute? So this is under, and Maya, I want to acknowledge your response as well. This is based on how Met Council is defining affordable, and as Maya has said in this response, that is at that 60% AMI level for rental and 80% AMI level for ownership. All right. I am going to move into the survey section on programs and policies. So this section is used to track the existence of these for local cities and townships. This year, we've tried to simplify this section. We used to ask for, there used to be a section on this page that asks for a more narrative description, and now we've tried to turn everything into check all that apply. So we have separate sections for programs that are more related to housing assistance, and then a section for programs that are more related to housing development. And locally funded here means that a community itself generated the funding for the program, or maybe received funding from a higher level of government, and then had control over how it was used, choosing how to allocate funding for that program. So just as an example here, a program could obviously exist in a local jurisdiction, but then be funded with local dollars, but it might not be operated by the local jurisdiction. So that could be indicated with the boxes here as well, or maybe a program is operated through a county, so a county or nonprofit, so it exists within the jurisdiction, but it might not be funded, or obviously then it wouldn't be administered locally as well. Yeah, so and again, we've tried to be more specific with the programs, and on the next slide you'll see the policies that we have listed. But if communities have feedback on this list as well, we would love to hear that as well. And then on the screenshot on the bottom left of this slide, the household served section is where we are capturing the number of people served under specifically home ownership programs, as opposed to capturing that in the project production area of the survey, because we don't necessarily need like address level data for down payment assistance and rehab loans and other home buyer assistance. So that is going to be the section where that can be reported, and we ask counties for this information as well. And then on the same slide, or on the same section of the survey, there's also going to be a section for policies. This list used to be more general, so we've tried to become, more specific with examples, not just saying tenants' rights policies or anti-displacement prevention or displacement prevention policies. So this section is asking for the year the policy was adopted, if it exists, and that year will carry over to year in the survey. And then we're just looking for confirmation on whether or not that policy still exists. And then there is also an option to add policies to this list, but it looks like I might not have captured it in the screenshot. But again, open to feedback on this list. And yeah. All right, so this is going to be the Housing Action Plan section of the survey. Again, these are the required statutory questions for LCA. Brief responses work for these questions. They're really, again, trying to get at efforts taken towards meeting housing goals. In your response, you can talk about plans to meet these goals too, if significant progress or the progress that you were hoping for, hasn't been met in the year that the question is asking about. That's totally okay to list as well. And just generally, I would say these narrative responses are very helpful for staff to know, what communities are planning. Are they a good fit for LCA? Are there specific projects coming up that might be a good fit for LCA? Things like that. And then at the bottom of this list, there is a new question this year for reporting on if your community has received an LCA grant and then deployed it as a loan. So that is a new question this year, and there is additional narrative that is not listed on that slide, but this is just an overview of the questions that will be in this section of the survey this year. All right, so generally, just to go over the main changes to the survey for 2025. Again, we really tried to simplify the policies and programs section, the addition of that additional housing action plan question for reporting out on grants deployed as loans. Again, more clarification to the project categories in the preservation and rehab section of the survey. We've also received a lot of a number of questions on land trust units and how to categorize acquisition more generally. So that has played a role into trying to further define what preservation can look like. And just because we know that that's a really important way to add to the affordable housing stock. And then finally, housing policy and production survey data. We hope to have this feed into an LCA eligibility tool that will show like status of meeting those statutory requirements and other reporting interactives online to show city reported progress towards meeting their identified housing goals. And again, just more generally hope that this will make the data that's reported in this survey more accessible and easier for communities to look up if they have met different LCA requirements. All right, and just in terms of upcoming communications for the 2025 survey, we're hoping that the survey will be opened in May, so look out for communications on when that survey is opening. Again, if you need to update your staff contact, please email me. That's listed on the slide as well. And just note if it's been a few years and you know where you think that the survey hasn't been filled out, we might not have a contact on specifically within the survey. So then we are leaning on our LCA communications team to try to reach a new appropriate contact. But if you know who that contact should be, that's really helpful to have that information as well. All right, and that is all I have. So I want to open space for questions. Again, we are always open to feedback, suggestions, challenges with the survey. A number of the changes that were made this year were based off of city feedback from last year's survey. So yeah, just want to leave some time for any other questions. Jonathan, thank you. I see your comment. Interested to see how the revised survey feels from the respondents perch. Kudos on the additional flexibility on grants used as loans. Yeah, if you have, if there are any other questions on that as well, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I'll jump in to say, please give us feedback. We don't want to make this a huge burden on city staff, and we want to make this data really usable. And we know that it is, we know that's a big deal to complete this survey. It takes a lot of staff time. So how can we make it easier, but still gather data that is usable and reportable and actually report out on that? So with that in mind, we're always welcome to feedback. And we do see this survey being much more integrated with the 2050, the upcoming 2050 comprehensive planning. So a little bit more tied to kind of the housing implementation plans that cities have done and identifying their needs and considerations for tools to use and reporting out on how cities are doing. We know that the survey lost kind of that points system, and some cities really liked that. They wanted to see how they were doing in relation to other cities. And so we hope in our reporting tools that we'll be generating this year and for the upcoming decade that'll be more clear that a city can see how they are doing in meeting their goals as well as regional goals and needs.
Well, again, feel free to reach out at any time. Otherwise, you should be seeing upcoming communications for the survey. So yeah, appreciate your time today, and I will go ahead and end the webinar. Thanks, everyone.